I'd like to call to order Board of Commissioners special meeting for Thursday, October 12th, 2017 for 7 p.m. Roll call, Mr. Turley.
Commissioner Harold.
Here.
Commissioner Haggis.
Here.
Commissioner Bertan.
Here.
Commissioner Gray.
Here.
Commissioner Facenda.
Here.
Commissioner Casero.
Here.
Commissioner Martino.
Everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, our first order of business, citizens input. Nobody? Okay, let the record show there is no citizens input. And we'll move on to work sessions. Turn over to Mr. Turley.
Thank you. First item today is a review of the Markview Manor revised master plan. And this is an item that was before you, I believe it was August, July or August. Look at the master plan, some options at Markview Manor. There was a lot of cost involved. There was a number of issues. So we worked with Rich Rosso a little further, try to develop some options, a phase plan as well as a scaled down plan, and see if we could make something work. And he's brought back to us some options. I think we'd like to review those with you and for information and then have some discussion.
Thanks, Mike.
Sir, please state your name.
Richard Rosso, landscape architect, RAUSO.
Thank you.
I was here, I think, in July, and we had gone over the master plans, and or actually it was one master plan, and so based on some of the comments from that meeting, we went back to the drawing board and came up with two schemes. I guess one was, and the one you'll see today is is pretty much the same scheme as we had that I presented in July, and then another scheme that was a little bit less in cost. So I have two schemes. I just want to quickly go over them for you, and I do have a cost estimate for them. And then one of the other things we did is we tried to estimate what the maintenance cost would be property for years, so you sort of get a whole picture as far as what, not only what it would cost to develop, the park, but also the yearly maintenance cost. So, and do you have the paper copies in front of you, or I can refer? Okay, all right, good. So the first sheet is just the narrative, and it has the Google Earth image of the property itself, and it's off of Hetty Lynn Drive, and I guess the main entrance of it is. Go to the next page. There you go. What we've done is, and I won't go through the entire thing, but we went through a program analysis to determine what elements might be included in the park. And again, we went over this in July, but I'll quickly sort of refresh your memory. And according to the NRPA, which is National Recreational Parks Association guidelines, neighborhood park has a service area of about a half mile, which is a walking distance, and if you go by the guidelines, that should just serve about between 1,000 and 2,500 people. And according to the NRPA guidelines, Markview Manor really does fall within that sort of definition of a neighborhood park. So with that in mind, we try to include the elements that would be typical within a neighborhood park. Markview Manor, the property itself, is about 6.5 acres. Almost all of it is wooded. Most of it is steeply sloped. There's only a small area, about an acre and a half, that is sort of, quote, developable or flat, I guess, for lack of a better term, or what I always say, Pittsburgh flat. But so the rest of it is sort of steeply sloped. Next slide, please. One of the things that, if you see on this slide here, there are some existing utilities. They're down, obviously, they're at Hetty Lane, and then also at the bottom in the willows along Cornwall Drive. So this site is sort of flanked by both of those potential access points. Next slide. This is not in your packet, but what I did is I took some pictures just to kind of, because there's a good chance you guys haven't gone down there lately and seen this situation, but the upper left-hand slide is going down to the entrance to the park itself. The upper right is looking back up Hetty Lane Drive. And if there was going to be development in that park, you probably have to provide some sort of handicap access or handicap parking within the park. And you would potentially have to, there's probably only room there for some parallel parking there along the road. And then in the middle left there's a locked gate entrance, and then going down into the park, there's a pretty overgrown, but there is a path that's down there. I guess at one point in time that was paved, or it's gravel, but it goes down into the park itself. So it's relatively steep, but it could be graded to provide handicap access, which is about 5%. Sort of the features that are in the park, bottom left, there's an existing pavilion that's not in great shape. And then also a little shed that's in there. So then they're really set on that slope itself. They've been sort of, looks like, in a state of disrepair for a while. Next slide. And then as you get to the bottom, if you look in the upper left-hand corner, there is a field that used to be potentially, there's an old backstop and fence there. And so I guess at one time there was a ball field. I'm not sure how much it was used, if it was just a neighborhood use or whether they actually played games there. But it's pretty overgrown with weeds now, around 3 feet high. There's also an old basketball court there. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, it's pretty much in a state of disrepair too. So the next sheet that we have is the master plan, and this master plan is the master plan that I had presented to you guys in July. There's only a couple things that we added to it. You'll see that in the upper right-hand corner, within the Willows development there on Cornwall Drive, there is some dedicated open space that I've indicated in green, and then that line with a pink border on it is private property. And in order to access the Markview Manor Park, you would have to cross a piece of private property. But we think it's really important that with that development going on there at the Willows, that you do provide some sort of access to the park. And if you walk through there today, there is a path that I guess was used many years ago. It's kind of overgrown, but you can make your way through there, and it is relatively steep. But obviously, with all that development going in there, I think it's critical that we provide some sort of access. I mean, people are probably going to find their way through there one way or another, whether you plan on it or not. So we have that shown. So that's one thing that's shown there that wasn't on your in your packet in July. And then in the it looks like in the lower right-hand corner, there's also access to the park actually does sort of cross a piece of private property there too, and potentially we would need some sort of access easement through there also. So a little bit problematic getting into the park on both sides. The main features, and again, this was the scheme we had shown in July. The main features of the master plan is a new picnic pavilion, a new playground. That was one of the things that from the 2004 survey, the big things people wanted in that park were a playground and walking trail. So that's what we've provided. We've also resurfaced the basketball court, provided a hillside slide down to the developed portion of the park, which is kind of a cool feature to have. And then a large sort of open lawn area that looks like a 3-leaf clover or Mickey Mouse ears, I guess, in the open space. And then again, a picnic pavilion and a playground. So that's the scheme that we had shown in July. Next slide, that's just the grading plan. It's showing up a little light. So in analysis, I won't go through all the items, but the analysis of what we're calling the Scheme A is that essentially 5 acres of the park will remain undisturbed. About 1.3 or 1.5 acres is usable property, which I said before. We have graded it so that all elements of the park would be handicap accessible, which is critical if you're going to go for funding through DCNR or other state agencies. They're going to want to see everything to be handicap accessible. And couple things just to note, and I had said it before, there's really no, it would be a walk-in park or neighborhood park. There's really no available area for parking within this site. And I guess obviously one of the minuses of this park development is that everything, the most development between the playground and the large lawn area is really sort of not visible from Hetty Lynn Drive, so that's problematic also. As far as having eyes and ears on that park. The next master plan, the next plan that we have, looks pretty much the same. But what we did is we sort of dummied it down. We took out the playground, we took out the picnic pavilions, and this area and the hillside slide. So this master plan really is just a series of walking trails. I mean, from the 2004 study. The main or the first ask for item from the residents was walking trail. So that's what we provided, and obviously walking trail connections from down on Cornwall Drive and then also from Hetty Lynn. So it's strictly, whenever I say a walk-in park, it's walk in and walk around, I guess, for lack of a better term. But that's the that would be the development. And again, we still have those same sort of issues where we would be crossing out private property in 2 areas. So there's also an access easement that we'd have to address. And with that, when looking at the cost estimate, if you can, 2 more, keep going, 1 more. There you go. With that in mind, I had the cost estimate. I broke the Scheme A down, which is sort of has the most features. Keep in mind, I don't have any money in there for any access easements because that could really potentially be a wild card that we really don't have, really at this point can't really quantify. So I didn't include that in there. But anyhow, Scheme A, it would be broken down into 2 phases, both about $200,000. So the first scheme would be $222,000 for the first phase of Scheme A, and then $202,000 for for the second phase. And essentially what we would do is the way it's broken down for schemes is Scheme A, the first phase would be the construction of the walking trails, essentially the connections, and then phase 2 of Scheme B would be the all the playground equipment, and sort of all more fun elements, I guess you could say, with the playground, the pavilion itself, the hillside slide, those sort of things. So between the two phases, you end up with approximately about $422,000. Also, I projected next is next slide after that. The next slide after that is I tried to excuse me, project some maintenance costs and the yearly maintenance costs between maintenance on the pavilion, benches, playground equipment, and some leaf removal, brush removal, lawn mowing, trash removal. It's about $15,000 a year for the maintenance cost. And then Scheme B, the cost of that is about $202,000 for Scheme B. And again, that Scheme B was pretty much just the walking trails themselves. And then projecting that maintenance costs about $12,000 a year to maintain that park. So you have that. And then really the next slide. The next couple slides are really just some background information. What I had told you guys before is that, you know, the definition of a neighborhood park is about a quarter mile to half mile radius. This is just a sheet from the NRPA that sort of backs that up. The next slide is some more background information that just defines sort of what are the main wants for the residents. And then the last slide was the Markview Manor survey, the results from the Markview Manor survey done in 2004, and that includes, you know, the number one asked for amenity based on that 2004 survey was walking and biking trail. The second was a playground. The third was picnic and pavilion areas. So as you can see, we sort of tried obviously to respond to the survey itself. So with that, any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Anybody have any questions for Rich?
Hey, Rich, I got a question. Can I ask him a question? Is that okay?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sure.
State your name. Come up here and state your name.
Sure, I can do that. Yeah, my name is Steve Wagle. I'm born and raised in Markview Manor. I graduated in Norman in 1992. I moved back here about 2 years ago. And I was talking to Mike the other day, giving him some background. I can give you any background you need as far as how much the field was used. PAL actually used to play there. They used to have regional teams. Markview, when we were in PAL minor league, Markview Manor had two teams, Markview Purple, Markview Green. We played Penns Woods, we played Hillcrest, we played Stewartsville, Country Hills. Everybody was like home and away. So you played at all those parks. And regarding the meeting we had the other night about parks, I mentioned to Mike that if these were developed, at least if the ball field was redeveloped, if that was an option, it would kind of satisfy some of the need from the meeting the other night for Park and Recreation, that they were asking for multiple ball fields around the township. I know it's just one, it's not a huge field, it was for the PAL 9, 10, 11-year-olds at that age. But I walk my dog through the neighborhood pretty much daily, and I see multiple people. In fact, we started a Facebook group called the Kids of Markview Manor about 2-3 years ago. There are a couple hundred members, former residents, current residents, and I had sent up a thing maybe in April, kind of said, hey, would you guys want to see the park redeveloped? All the memories came flooding back. You know, I would volunteer, I would bring my chainsaw, I would bring my dump truck, I would bring this. So what I was going to ask was, if it's an option cost-wise, if some sort of a volunteer effort could be done, which would reduce, you know, whether it's different construction, whether it's landscaping, whether it's whatever, a couple weekends, whatever, to cut trees. Now, again, I know insurance-wise, you don't want to have a bunch of people with chainsaws running around. I get that. But women and men, kids, a lot of people had expressed some interest. In fact, I told this story to Mike real quick. I was walking my dog a few months back, and I saw a kid literally. The playground's at the intersection of Hetty Lynn and Marshall. And he lived about, there was a gentleman and his kid who was probably about 6. out catching ball in the street in Marshall. They're about 6 houses down from the playground. And I said, too bad the playground wasn't up. He said, what playground? I said, the one that's literally right down there at the intersection. He was like, there's a playground there? I said, yeah. I said, you can go check it out. You might have to take a machete with you to hack through some of the weeds to get down there. But it was booming in the 80s, and I think probably started dying in maybe the early 90s. As you mentioned, the sight line to the pavilion was a problem because, not me, I'm gonna throw a disclaimer, but there was some riffraff. The skaters, the young kids would go down there with cigarettes and do their thing. And that's when it started to get run down. Graffiti, whatever, we're not gonna go too far into that, but it was a great park. It was used all the time. I mean, I think, I saw your survey was 2004.
Correct.
Part of me thinks an updated one wouldn't be a bad idea, because the reason I say that, I would come back and help my parents hand out treats for trick or treat. When we were kids, the doors were closed 20 minutes before the deadline because they were out of candy and drinks. Early 2000s, late 90s, they would get 2 cases from Kerber's. They'd go through 1 1/4 and keep it open past 8 o'clock. I'm starting to see more kids in the neighborhood over the past 13, 14 years. I don't have a population study, but I'm seeing it more just based on that and seeing people when I walk my dog. It would be great. I know the cost is high, I recognize that. But I just want to give you guys some input from someone who's born and raised, knows the park like the back of his hand from in the early 80s all throughout, went to high school around here, still has family that lives there. And I see the new demographics starting to come in. And just from input from people I've heard around the neighborhood and old classmates and old schoolmates, and it's there, interest is there. And again, volunteerism, if it's something that's feasible, I could definitely be a channel of that, because I do run a group as an admin. There's a couple hundred people in there that said they would come from a couple miles now, seeing and doing different things. But I think we could probably get some work done, if necessary. So that's all. I just want to if you guys have any questions for me about Markview. I don't know if any of you are from there, family members there, whatever, but it's a great plan. I'd like to really see it turn around. I think that'd be a great help. So thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your input. Anybody else have any questions for Rich? Yeah.
Well, Rich, I just want to, the ball field's a bit of a problem there with the limitations. The site has some problems. You're well aware, access into it. It's not the greatest piece of ground, okay? And if you wanted to pursue this, I think there's some problems to solve before you do anything else, like access. And we moved this one ahead of the comp planning we're doing because we realized we were going to look at this. So it might be time for the rest of the parks planning to catch up and do some master plan, because ultimately this needs to compete for dollars for all the other things we're doing in regional parks too. So this, we've identified a number of problems with it. I'm not saying we shouldn't do anything here. There's a big cost. There's some problems to overcome. So it's going to be up to you. But we may just want to let the rest of the park planning catch up, and then this works its way in with all the other master planning and things we're trying to do over the next year.
Okay, I agree with that.
That's good.
I mean, I had a few concerns, like you said, about the ball field. I know the possibility about basketball courts, but one of the things we always do here is recreational, actually, sport fields. And I know we talked about even like lighting, so most of the Paula sports fields don't have lights, so if we put lights on some of our other facilities, we might be able to use them more hours of the day. So I think we would pull this in. Obviously, the plan's not going to go to waste. Obviously, you guys invest your time and resources in it already.
That's why we asked for a scaled down plan, because the issues and the cost got very high for the benefit. And we thought maybe some trails or a scaled down plan. Now, if you do a scaled down plan and you got some DCNR money, or maybe it's something you don't do the first year or two, that's something you want to do in the not too distant future. It might just be something that's not an immediate thing you do, but you really want to do. take a look at it that way too. But I just think the other park planning we're doing needs to catch up. And the only reason we pulled this one out separately is because there was particular interest in this, and we decided to go ahead and look at some master planning. So that's sort of why this was looked at separately.
I'd like to ask Steve. Steve, Markview Manor used to have their own civic association that owned that property, correct?
I believe, yes.
Okay, do you know what happened there?
I don't really, the way I found out, to try to get some background about what had happened, about a year or so ago, I was walking and I kept thinking, I don't know, there's a really big house that was built to the right of it. And I thought maybe they had bought the property out. So I went to school with Teddy Kopas, the commissioner, and he pointed me to John. And then I had emailed John, and John, I think, told me he was going to be working with you. Then like 2 weeks later, John resigned or whatever. So, and he had told me that I guess the township did still own it, so I didn't really go that much further into inquiring about, exactly how, where it had gone. He may have said that it had been sold and rebought or something. I have to pull up the email, I don't have it in front of me. But I do believe it was owned by the Civic Association at one time. Now, whether any of the other Markview clubs, such as the Women's Club or any of the other ones, had any interest in it, I couldn't tell you that. I can probably check on our Facebook page with some of the people that have been around for a while. They may have some further information, and I could definitely get that for you. I can kind of get that for you if it's something you'd be interested in.
Okay, I know I'm from Penn's Woods, and we have a civic association there. What's that?
You're the rivals. You're the bad.
And we do a lot of fundraising and that to have what we have down there, and it's a good organization. We do have a park that we own there off of St. Clair called Campbell's Court, which I know the problems that were down there at one time, like you said, with the the smoking, the beer drinking, and everything like that. And the problem was because it didn't have a site. The police couldn't even get down in there, without walking. I think there for a while you could drive a four-wheel drive down in there, but that was for naught. And it has just went to despair. You made mention that there were some people that would be willing to maybe revitalize this park?
There were. Again, I kind of just threw out after I had thought about it, and I sent out just sort of a poll to the group that we have that said, hey, if I would say something, if, I don't know what's going to come out of it, if there was a volunteer effort, would anybody be interested? Expecting maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people. And they started flooding in. And again, I know saying is different than doing, let's be honest. But there were probably a good 40 or 50 people that in different ways said that they would like to contribute, just, if given notice. Now, I'm not going to be able to post tonight and say, hey, can you guys come next weekend with it? That's not going to happen. But if it was something that we said, hey, there's an effort possibly in the spring of 2018 or whenever, for a couple weekends in a row that this is what we want to do, we want to bring your shovels, bring this, bring that, bring your weed whackers, we can do it. I'm very confident that there would be a nice turnout.
Well, one of the problems the township has with that, we have unions and things like
Exactly.
that. But where I was going with this is, can that area, that property be turned back over to Markview? And they can get their people together and do some fundraising and
That piece of property there.
I mean, if there was an interest for it. I don't know, I'm just throwing
Might be
something
a question for
on the
Bruce.
wall.
I'd like to look at how we obtained it.
If I remember correctly, and I think we talked about this one time before, Bob Murdo was on the board at the time from Markview Manor when he was living over there on Craig Drive. And he was approached by the remaining member, I think, of the Women's Association or the Civic Association, whoever owned it. And we took it over, I'm going to say, probably 16, 17 years ago, maybe a little more. So there was nobody left in that organization. So they asked us, whoever it was, and it was just abandoned. And they offered it to us. I don't remember if we, how the transfer even took place, if it was condemnation on our part, because there was nobody on their side to actually sign the formal agreements. But I'm sure that, in fact, I know Bob would remember at least some of it, talk to him. But I mean, as far as giving it back to somebody, I wouldn't have a problem with that.
I just felt if there was a big enough interest and, you know, it's something else we
Yeah,
could
I mean,
look at.
again, I can engage the group discussions. I mean, it's not just on Facebook. I know people word of mouth and phone and email and everything that we have been in touch about it. Definitely something to pursue if possible, you know, instead of just letting it be the way it is. Because right now it is, you know, no, you can't use it. I mean, you saw it yourself. You can't even get down there.
Right.
And the sight line has always been a problem, even when we played ball there. Where that gate was, it's a gravel road. And it's pretty much one lane, maybe 1.5 if you're nice. And
It's about 8 to 10 feet wide.
yeah, and it really, even, you know, everyone would park on that and walk down to the field and to the bleachers, the parents, into the pavilion and everything. But sight was really even a problem then because there's one house that's right on the corner of Hetty and Marcia, and it's like their property. And I'm sure they probably put trees up there when they built the house so that they didn't have to see the playground 24/7. You know, I don't know the rhyme and reasoning to it, but, you know, trimming down, cutting down anything, you know, I don't know if it's feasible, but I think the volunteers would do it from what I've heard.
Yeah, and I know there was a guy that lived on the left going in there that he had put pipes and chain up because of the parking and everything
Mhm.
back then.
Yeah, that's right, it's before the gate,
Yeah.
yeah. And that road actually used to lead to the basketball court. You just drove around a little bit and came back and it came to the basketball court.
That was just some other food for thought.
I appreciate it, thank you.
Thanks.
Like, there would also be added costs for the accessibility on both sides of the park also.
If that would be maybe the first thing to
Right.
address.
That's what I would say.
Both.
Looking at the design, I mean, we could provide handicap access from Hetty Lane, but as far as down at the bottom, in the willows at Cornwall Drive, it would be extremely difficult to provide a 5% slope all the way up into the park. Not impossible, but difficult. So you'd incur some grading costs, you know, to make that connection.
Anybody else have any questions? Do you want to wait for Bruce to come back? Get his opinion on it? You want to move forward? Okay. All right, thank you, Rich.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Good. Mike, next time.
Okay, he's going to pull up, there were a couple of slides, but the next item is the 5-year road planning. The 5-year road planning effort, as you know, just for a quick background, I know you're familiar with what we're doing, but over the last several months, we've been involved with robotics and Carnegie Mellon with a new technology for detecting road distresses and analyzing them and whatnot. And Ryan had given you a review of that last month at the work session. And obviously we had the data, and since then we've been working on trying to develop a plan going forward. We've done both 4- and 5-year planning in recent times. This was a 5-year plan, but see if he's having trouble pulling it up. Well, if you have your handout, it's not something that's critical that we display, because I'll just talk through a couple of the slides. But anyway, just by way of background, that's how we got to where we were at. So we wanted to develop a plan, but we wanted to analyze, we wanted to analyze what we've done over the last 4 or 5 years with the increased spending on the road program and see how successful we've been. And the general results are captured in Bob's memo, and you'll see if we look at just deteriorated roads, DNF roads as we call them. In 2013, we had somewhere around 54 miles, and this recent survey showed we have about 44 miles, which is a reduction of almost 20%. So it's very positive, but there's also a good bit of work to do. In Bob's memo, he captures what he thinks we can do with a certain amount of funding. I mean, one of the policy questions is, are we spending the right amount of money? Should be more or less? And we believe that what we've done has been good. We've made progress, and we should stay at that number roughly. I mean, that's a decision you're going to have to make. But for the next few years, in 2 years, we'll update this again every 2 years and really monitor it closely. With the more efficient way that we're doing this now, enables us to do that. So the right amount of money, we felt like I think in his memo here, it talks about all the F-rated streets will be done within a couple of years based on that funding, and by 2022, all the D-rated streets. It doesn't consider the streets that will deteriorate over that time, but it clearly shows progress and catching up. So that's sort of I think the recommendation for you to think about. I did want to. There's some really interesting things in the slides here. So, because this is really an important part of the story. If you look here, the first slide, the road miles between ward are very, very unbalanced, and this is important to know. So we see this as a township-wide plan, but I certainly understand everybody's going to be interested in their particular ward. So you see some wards have nearly double the road miles of other wards, like say Ward 5. And the charts in front of the first, the bar charts in front show roads in DNF road miles. And they likewise are very unbalanced. Ward 1 having Ward 1, 6, and 7 having 9 to 10 miles of deteriorated roads, and 2 having 8, which, by the way, that was really, for me, was one of the surprises, is Ward 2, that in between the two surveys, it was surprising. So I would just assume, we didn't have the conversation with Bob, but I would assume that last time we had a lot of C-rated roads, and in 5 years' time deteriorated. I have to think that's what happened. We use slightly different methodologies, but it was good enough that had to be what happened. So that was a bit of a surprise. So if you move ahead a couple slides, Andy, you'll see. Jump ahead, maybe okay, this is the percentage by ward, and you can see it's unbalanced. You jump ahead, Andy, you'll see this slide shows Ward 1 has 29% of its roads are in deteriorated condition. And if you move ahead, back up Ward 2, do you have Ward 2 slide? Ward 1, somehow we're missing. Well, Ward 2, I'll just tell you, has 38%. Like I said, it was quite a surprise there. And Ward 3 has 18% in much better shape. Ward 4 in very good shape, 11%. Ward 5 in excellent shape, 7% of their roads, a low number of road miles. And then you go Ward 6 has 38%, and Ward 7, 32%. So obviously it's just so unbalanced that any plan that we develop that targets the problem, the investment we make is going to be targeted towards those that are in much more deteriorated shape. So 1, 2, 6, and 7 fall into that. So that's sort of the little background of how we when you see the plan, you might see some wards, certainly those wards in a few years down the road that most of their streets are going to be in good condition, notwithstanding whatever wants to deteriorate over that time. So with that, we had Bob Guati field check the data, felt that the data we used was pretty accurate, and had him put together a list of roads. There's no easy effort because there's so many roads. Which roads get done this year and next year? And you certainly can debate that. Could you do one road rather than another? I guess you could. But we tried to put it together, considered the distribution of different wards, the ones that were really pressing needs, and how much money we were using in particular years. We tried to pull all that together and have Bob make a judgment on which ones we thought we would do and present that to you. And that's what's in front of you. So if you move ahead, in 2018, I think from a schedule standpoint, what we do if the result isn't acceptable to you, there's a lot of questions. We don't really have to approve the 5-year plan. We can do it, but it's sort of a guide for us. And every year we're going to update it because there's always be a few changes or things that we'll have to do. So what is important, I think, is that we try to, if we can, have a plan, a long-term plan like this, but if we have to wait a little bit, we can do that. We really need to identify the dollars in the 2018 plan because we're ready to roll out a budget to you here in a week or two, and we'd like to, if we have those numbers squared away, it would be really helpful. So that would be what we hope to accomplish, if not today, maybe even next week. So with that, I brought Bob and Richard here to talk about roads if you want, the dollars, the survey, whatever you want to, whatever of interest to you.
Anybody got any input?
I would just like to say that I really like this report. I think it gives a lot of good information, and the fact that we're planning that far out is great. It certainly points out, like Mike said, the disparity in the wards, which ones are in great shape and which ones are not in so great shape. This is actually pretty valuable when we get people calling us as individuals saying, hey, I want you to pave my road. And I've done this with other people and said, hey, I'll be over in 10 minutes. We'll go take a ride and look at some of the other roads that need paved, and then you tell me yours is worse. I will pave it. And that works pretty well, but this is a lot easier when you can lay it out for them. So I commend you guys, and I would certainly like to adopt the 5-year plan. My question is, how long can we afford to do that at our increased rate?
Well, that's a good question. We're getting some more liquid fuels money through the legislation that was passed a few years ago, and some of that goes used towards salt. So some money from the general fund is used to pay the here's the breakdown. When you want to look at the total. This plan has about 1.1 million in overlay, but there's also 100,000 in fiber matting, so that's 1.2. You have some the road department buys about $150,000 worth of cold patch, and there's some engineering, so it's another almost 200,000. And then you have Ardera Road last year, so that's another 200,000. So you start adding it up, and you're at about 1.6 when you the total road, not just the overlay, the total road program, 1.6. And there's a couple of things to think about. Well, the other part of this is the public works capital line item. Now, Ardera Road is actually in that line item, not accounted for here. It's just the way it was done for a special project. But there's a number of stormwater projects and a detention cleaning project and the design of the spoil facility and public works, all priorities. That looks like what you're going to see next month is a proposal about 420,000 more, about 50,000 more than last year, which was not a small number. That's when you combine all that, that's $2 million, roughly approaching $2 million. It's not a small. So those two things to think about. One is the dollar amount, and the other thing is the ability of us to deliver so many projects in such a number. I think we can do this. Rich and Bob can comment about that, but there's times when we're kind of hard pressed to do other things when the road program's going on. We can do it, but we do have some limitations if we want to increase that, partly because we have a number of stormwater projects that will be proposed, but I must tell you, some of the ones we want to do aren't going to make it, because you can't do it all in 1 year. It's going to have to be over a couple of years. So the answer to how can we afford to do it, if you look at, obviously our budget for the last few years has included some transfers from the unencumbered reserve to pay for that. But now, we've had a few years where we've had some unexpected revenues that have helped us, the HVAC settlement, the oil and gas lease. So we delayed some of that, and sometimes the revenues come in slightly higher, and sometimes some things don't happen and we project. But there's about $6.5 million in the reserve now, but we're going to need about $1.5 million before the year's out. We're not going to see that much more revenue come in except for the wage, third quarter wage. So we're going to need, you'll have about $5 million. And then there's a reserve policy, fund policy. I have to check it again. Joan prepared that. I think that was 20%. So if you're at a general budget of around 14 million, that's $3 million is your reserve, what you want. So what we're going to propose to you next month is going to be about a $2 million projected transfer. So if you had 5 million and project 2, you'd be at your reserve number within a year or two. So while we have some reserve money, it's a little bit misleading in that we can't sustain the numbers real long term. So I think that some things might work out. You can do this for a few years and then you see where you're at. But you have to assume that within a few years you're either going to have to cut your program and spending a little bit or increase taxes if you get to the fund reserve balance number, 3 million. Or you don't follow your policy. You run it down to 0, I guess. But then it gives you another couple years. So like I said, the budget is projected, and it doesn't always happen like you plan and project, but it's probably going to be about a $2 million transfer for next year is what we propose. We're going to need at least $1 million, maybe $1.5 million to pay the bills the rest of this year. And then the fund balance, if it's 20%, as I think I remember, would be about $3 million. So you have a couple years that you could do this. But those are decisions for you to think about. I mean, this is where we do these efforts because you think about the long term. We wouldn't want you to be, how all of a sudden do we have no money left in the reserve or $1 million or $2 million? So.
Yeah, that's certainly something to think about. The solicitor just asked me when the last time we raised taxes was, and that was in 2000. That's when we raised them 1.5 mils, 1 mil for the fire service, we assessed the fire tax, and $0.5 mil for capital improvements. And then since then, we actually reduced them twice, $0.5 mil each time, within the past 6 years or so, something like that. So we've been very stable tax-wise. I would like to see us stay that way. So we just need to monitor the spending here.
Well, I mean, excuse me, the dollar amount is up to the board. I mean, I think you're going to direct us what you want us, how you want us to do. So for us, for the staff, for me, I think we need to look at this over several years. When we do a long-term plan like this, we don't really look at this roads this year or next year. We're interested, we know it needs done, it'll be done within the next few years, so we can do things over several years. We can sustain these numbers for a while. If you want to increase it, we can do that, but it's just going to be more money gets transferred to cover the costs. But that's going to be up to you collectively.
Yeah, I mean, I was one of the ones pushing for a bigger road paving program, and I don't want to say we maxed it out, but I think we might be getting close to our max with, pushing the public works guys as hard as we do, and they do a great job getting out there, getting the work done. Everything, like you said, just taking all that out of the reserve fund. It's going to eventually catch up if we try to grow the program more than we already are. I think, was it last year, I was kind of reserved on expanding even a little bit more than we did. And I was one of the ones originally pushed for it. I think Andy spoke to the board when I first got elected about 7 years ago that we needed to catch up. And I think we're in the right steps, but I think we don't want to step too far in the other direction at the same token.
Well, one of the reasons we proposed what we did, again, it's going to be up to you to decide, is because it's something that we could get done. It's a large program, it's not small, especially considering the other public works projects we're proposing to do. We can sustain it for some time. And those were the reasons. And really the data and the analysis that Bob and Ryan and I and all of us were involved with trying to, and how much, this was ultimately why we do this, is how much are we spending, is it the right amount, are we making progress, and this is the benefit from a policy standpoint of the effort that we did. And this is how we came to these numbers. But like I said earlier, it's not just the overlay number of 1.1 million, there's other things in here too that really drive this much bigger program overall than that. Ardera Road will be done, thank goodness. After this is the last third to last phase, it's almost 200,000 will be to finish that. So that will help free up a little bit too. But like I said, when you add that in the fiber map program and some of the things we're doing, it gets up to a $1.6 million program. It's not just the 1.1 overlay portion of it. So it's not a small number.
If you look in generalities, considering and simplifying it, with the township having 160 miles of roads, the 5-year program will address about 25% of those roads. So we're on about a 20-year life cycle. If we're down south, the biggest thing you have to worry about is the oxidation of the roads because of the sun. But we're in western Pennsylvania, and you have your poor subgrade conditions, your Pittsburgh red bed clays, your Shenley clays. You have your poor drainage conditions, and your freeze fall cycle in western Pennsylvania. None of those are good for roads. So 20 years in western Pennsylvania to get a road to last that long, that's tough. So I think we're going to have to maintain this funding level for a while to try to keep up. The robotics, I'm old school, but the robotics, I was amazed with the system, and I went out and looked at all the DNF rated roads, and I can't say it's perfect, but it's darn good. What I've seen in the field, I'm very impressed. And if there's a particular road that maybe your constituents are like you're down to get on the list, I would just suggest let this process play out and have some patience, and I think things will work out in the long run. I'm really interested 2 years from now. You know, we see the 2013 to 2017 DNF rated roads be reduced, but the 2013 DNF rated roads were a little different system. When we get to 2019 and do that additional study, I think we're going to have really good data to see how well we advance. But I would just ask for patience, and we'll get through it.
Any other board input? I mean, I don't know if you're looking for approval of this, or you're looking maybe for next week for approval of it. I'm okay if you're looking for a motion for a...
Well, I don't know if we could do that, I guess, Bruce, but we don't necessarily have to, because we'll
Put it on the agenda.
well, you could make the motion to adopt the plan, but we're gonna bring back to you, or if you're okay with the 2018 plan, we'll put that in. I guess if you wanna talk about it during budget time, we can do that again. But I'm more interested in the number, the dollar amount. And of course, I'm sure the budget will get kicked around a little bit too, but so we have something to put in, we're fairly comfortable with it. That number is about the right amount, then it helps us, even if it's not exactly right. Once we decide to change a road or whatever. So we'll just move that into the budgeting phase. So I don't know if we should, if you want to officially adopt it, we should, realizing that it's a plan and we're going to make the year to year, every year we'll provide a specific plan based from this and change it a little bit.
You want to put it on the agenda for next week?
Yeah, Tony's not here too, so.
That's the appropriate thing. Put it on the agenda.
Mike, I'm okay with the number. I think the number's good, but I would like to massage a little bit of the list. Remove a couple streets and add a couple streets. I know, Bob, I don't know if you looked at Orchard. Orchard had water line replacement this year.
Yes, I have. There's been some patching, and that's a road that I think we need to talk to the authority about an agreement. Orchard is not a DRF rated road. That would be a C rated road, but there's been some patching, and I think we need to open up a dialogue with the water authority about an agreement for Orchard.
So it's not a DRF rated road, so it wouldn't make the list, but it's one that's had a lot of water line breaks and there's a lot of patches. So it's one we would like to do under an agreement. But we may, we typically like to wait a year for the settlement when we have all these, but we can't always do that. So what is, your recommendation is to wait a year or two on Orchard?
After they do the patching, I think it's good to wait a year. I think case in point is Ormsby, where we waited, and it was the following year, and there had a considerable amount of settlement. And actually, we had it on for the following year. We had to delay that for a year because of the undesirable, unacceptable settlement on Ormsby. So at least a year, I would say, after they do the patching.
Well, they just did the patching this year, so I mean, I'm fine with waiting another year to see if we have any settle on the asphalt. But there is one other road that I would like to massage into the list.
Which one?
Fairview.
Yeah. Airview's one that we've talked about in the last couple of days, and we think that makes a certain amount of sense. I think we used, you thought, well, if I remember, you thought maybe there was another road you wanted to do instead of that, but since we're doing Carlson, we would just, isn't that right, Bob?
Yeah, Airview we had on for 2020, and again, if you add something, what do you take? And maintain the budget. Certainly need to be cognizant of the budget, and we have some suggested alternatives that we can do if we have, depending on what the cost of the base bid, and perhaps Airview may be a consideration to be added to the added alternatives. Considering we have Carlson and Airview connects on to Carlson.
Yeah.
And compared to Carlson and Porter, Airview's a couple steps down on the ratings.
Well, Porter just had significant work done to it.
I understand, but they're got to have a baseline. We had robotics come out, and the next analysis will be 2 years. And, that'll certainly help. Perhaps even change the condition level a little bit, but we need to draw baseline. So but Airview, I wouldn't have no issue putting Airview on as an add alternate, considering that it connects with Carlson. Carlson is on it in 2019.
So then the question is it going to be put on the plan or put on as maybe the first alternate?
Yes. I would suggest put it on as an alternate, and see how the costs go. I think we need to be careful of when the costs do come. The biggest variable is the base repair. I think this was the third year that we included the base repair in the contract. The contractor base repair can do it much more efficiently than Public Works. Could you imagine doing Cedar Glen this year? Cedar Glen was an absolute disaster. The amount of base repair, it was one of the poorest constructed roads that I've ever seen. We mill the road, we do a proof roll, and the truck was sinking not to the axle. We used over 1,000 tons of base repair on the Cedar Glen. So that's the biggest variable. And we were pretty close the first 2 years. This year, the third year, about $80,000 over. So even though the prices come in good, and we say, well, we can add some alternates, we've got to be cognizant about the biggest variable, the base repair, and we won't know until we get the streets opened up and do anything we do to affect that.
So I think what Bob's saying is if you put it on as an alternate, you can decide when the bid comes in, you want to do it then. If that's acceptable, it could be the first alternate. So then you see what the actual prices are. I mean, if it was really, if the bids are really high, then maybe you decide not to do it. But if you really want to do it, bids are good, then you just add it on. So you just would make it one of the first alternates, I think, because you have to do the alternates in order.
That's correct.
And that would make sense. That would make sense because we're doing Carlson there. I mean, that would make sense to, if we got a good bid, and this would be one we'd want to do.
With using liquid fuels, we have to follow PennDOT's standards. And for add alternates, they want them in order. You have alternate 1, 2, 3. So you award the base bid, or base bid plus alternate 1, base bid plus alternate 1 plus 2. You have to spell it out in a bid.
The way I looked at it, Bob, is Verdant was already done, Old Trail's done. If you do Carlson next year, Airview's the only street in that circle that's not done. So I think it's smarter to do Airview and at least get that circle of road of everybody coming into that plan completely done. If I have to lose 2 roads to do it, that's what I want to do.
Well, even if Airview's not done, it's big enough to stand on its own. You do try to minimize mobilization, but again, it's about $50,000. It's a big enough road to stand on its own if it doesn't get done next year. But if you have it as the first alternate, you can make that decision.
I had one in mind like that for first alternate, Mark Drive, and it worked out, you know, where it did come in low, so.
The bids, the unit prices, typically, for 1 year to the next, would add about 3 to 5% on for inflation. The prices were so darn low this year, and it's very, very competitive. Very. Prices are 20% lower than they were 2 years ago. How long are they going to be there? I don't know. So for the unit prices I used to develop at this year's unit plus 15%, just to try to be on the conservative side. I mean, if the prices come in next year anywhere close to this year, I think we'll certainly be able to do quite a few add orders.
Well, do you think bidding early
Oh,
has
yes.
something to do with it?
Absolutely, absolutely. That is February, no later than March. Absolutely, got to be ready.
Do you feel we have enough alternates on our list? Because if,
Yeah, keep in mind, we got the unknown about the base repair,
right,
the biggest variable. So I think you need, we have a budget. We want to keep that in mind. What happens if we go from 5% to 8%? It's going to keep a little way, but not go right at that budget.
So the alternates, if you add, if Airview would be an alternate, the first alternate, let's say, you still have 160,000, and you have a lot. An alternate's 160,000 at least, if not more.
okay, any other input? No, we'll put it on the agenda for next week. Okay, is that it, Mike? All right, thank you, Mike. Okay, moving on to planning and engineering topics, Mr. Blanco.
There are 5 items tonight to be reviewed. The first one is Lincoln Corner site plan. This is a site plan for a medical office building at the corner of North Thompson Lane and Route 30. This came in the spring. We reviewed it, we had some comments, we got back to the applicant with those comments, and it seemed to be taking quite a long time to get a reply from them. Eventually, they said that they were switching to a different architect, and they asked for a time extension. 2 time extensions were granted. We had through this month to make a decision. We were then told that they had acquired the property next door. This was the property where the medical marijuana dispensary was proposed. They didn't get their license, so that property was available. They bought that property as well, which we were told allowed them to put in a bigger building, and they were back to the drawing board. But we have not gotten another time extension from them, and we are faced with either a deemed approval if we don't approve what's on the table now, or we've got to deny it. There certainly were enough reasons to deny it based on what was presented before. So that is the recommendation of the Planning Commission and myself, is to deny this. The applicant's consultant was aware of that. He understands they'll start over with a new site plan.
Questions?
They just don't want to withdraw it.
They didn't suggest that. They could. If you think that's advisable, I can certainly make that offer.
It's a better way to go. I don't want, we deny it now, they can take an appeal. I'd rather them withdraw.
Okay.
If it can't be done, we'll deny it.
Why don't I prepare a resolution denying it, but in the meantime, see if we can get them to
I mean, they're gonna be coming
withdraw.
back in again, so they ought to come in with a good taste in their mouths. They ought to withdraw it.
Okay. I think that's a sound idea. Okay, the next item is the James Urban Site Plan. And this is I'm sorry, not site plan, subdivision, excuse me. This is existing as a 3-lot subdivision on September Lane, which comes off of Sandy Hill Road. There are 3 homes there now. The first one was built in '99. The second one was built in 2000 or 2001. The third one was built in 2001. With each of those home constructions on the subdivision plan, it was stated that they understood that there were only 3 homes permitted on a private road. So we're now at that 3 homes. They've come in and want to put a 4th one in on the acreage towards the back. That's the real light colored piece that you can see on the left half of the screen. And what we're looking at is a private lane that is 750 feet long, 12 feet wide, serving 3 homes. The Saldo says that there will be no more than 3 homes on a private road. I know they looked at upgrading this to a public road. Problem is it's about 20-some% slope, and it would not meet our requirements for a public street because of that slope. What they would like to do is extend the road about another 230, 250 feet, put a cul-de-sac at the end. I think I've got it closed, there we go. And use that to service the 4th home on the site. Planning Commission said, well, you got 3, we don't have a problem with 1 more. My problem is stormwater management, and at some point are we going to be asked to take over this road. It isn't a lot different than Pierce Street, which has 8 homes on a private road. And one of the arguments we've heard is, I pay the same tax as everybody else in the township does, why don't you maintain my road? Now, the present owners have said, no, we understand that won't be a problem, but they won't own that home forever. So I have concerns about that. I also have concerns about stormwater management. It's been added a little piece at a time, but right now we've got over 35,000 square feet, which is about 3/4 of an acre of pavement and rooftop with no stormwater management. Just to extend that private road adds another 5,000 square feet. We're now at 40,000 square feet. We're just under an acre, and we'll be over an acre of impervious when the new house is built. No suggestion that anything will or should be done for stormwater management. So I'm not in favor of it. The Planning Commission is. It doesn't happen often that we split, but I think it's a problem. That's my thought. You guys get the vote. I'd like some direction.
Andy, who's downstream from this area?
Immediately, it drains down to Brush Creek. And then Brush Creek, of course, runs along 993. And you remember the storm we had in June of 2009? We had water on the first floor of homes down by Alfred Scrap Metal and Penn Compression Molding. Now, is a 4th house going to create a torrent of floodwater? No, it isn't. But I always say that the tree doesn't fall with the first blow of the axe. It's blow after blow after blow. If we say, well, you can build 4 houses and do an acre of impervious with no stormwater management, then how do we say no to the next one, or the next one, or the next one? But again, that's my concern, that's my advice. You guys are the elected officials. Your call.
How much extra surface does the cul-de-sac give us too?
The additional paving that's shown there, which is 20 foot wide with a cul-de-sac at the end is about 5,000 square feet. There will be a driveway for the home, and then the home itself, I have no idea what size home they're looking at or how much driveway there will be.
Any other input?
I mean, how much other property back there in that area can be utilized for housing? Wasn't there something as far as they were gonna build one house, then they come back to the planning and zoning and ask for 2 or 3 or?
They have signed, or there are 2 prior subdivisions to go from 1 lot to 2 and 2 lots to 3, have both said, now you realize at 3, that's it. And both times they've signed off on that, we understand. We now have a letter from Mr. Urban says, I, James M. Urban, acknowledge and agree that the 4th building parcel on the September Lane subdivision will be final. The final. Okay.
Is that notarized, Andy?
It is notarized.
And that would be as long,
The other ones with a recorded plan, sure, they have to be notarized.
that would be as long as he owned the property, correct?
Well, that's a good question. I don't think a notarized letter in our file binds future property owners.
You could put a covenant in their deeds that would say that this is going to be private, and that would then put the new buyer on notice, because he's going to do a title search. If he looks, he's going to see that there's a covenant that says this road's going to remain private. You can do
Oh,
something like that.
but we would never see the deeds, so we don't know if that's in there or not. If we're gonna put it anywhere, we should put it on the recorded plan.
But this is only a site plan.
No, it's a recorded plan. It's a subdivision.
So you can maybe amend the subdivision to say that and have them do that.
That's been done twice before.
And now there's notice to the world because it's recorded.
Right?
In addition to that, is there some, you keep mentioning stormwater, is there some plan that you think they could adopt? Do something along that line?
This whole private drive drains towards Sandy Hill Road. It would be possible to do something down in the vicinity of the creek which parallels Sandy Hill Road.
So why don't you ask them if they're interested in doing that? What's that?
I was at the meeting and he was asked that, and he said there's a 36-inch pipe underneath his driveway.
His response was that we've never had flooding, so it won't be an issue.
Well, are they high up?
They are.
Well, they're never gonna get flooded.
No, they won't.
The management's not for them to get flooded, it's for what they're flood downstream.
Yeah, the site that generates the runoff is rarely the site that gets flooded.
So there's not really much of a stormwater plan that you could come up with that would be feasible?
I think it would be feasible.
I mean, would it be practical? Would it achieve an effect? In other words, is it, they're going to put water back into the stream's going to flood whenever.
But the whole idea is to try and retain some water on site and if not absorb it into the ground, at least slow it down.
Does your stormwater plan contemplate retaining water on site? I mean,
DEP's current plan is that they want to see the 2-year storm totally absorbed on site.
So what are you talking about? Some rain areas or some sort of plantings or something?
This much area, you're probably looking at a detention pond.
Okay. Well,
If it was house by house, you may be able to get away with a rain garden or something on each site. One of the homes is over 12,000 square feet for the home and the driveway. But I do believe there's land available where something could be done.
Well, is that something should this get tabled and you go back to them and say, hey, the board's considering this, you're going to have to put it on the subdivision plan and get it re-recorded, and they want some sort of stormwater proposal from you, i.e. rain gardens, a detention facility, whatever. I mean, if they want it bad enough, I would think that's what they want to do.
I agree.
I assume they want to put another family member on this.
I think Mr. Urban wants to downsize and build a new home for himself and
Sell the other one.
sell his other one.
Well, I mean, there's two things you could do. You know, change the subdivision, which show that it's a private street. And two, request that they come in with some sort of stormwater plan, either through rain gardens or a detention facility. And even if they're individual treatment detention facilities, somehow retain the water on the site better. And if that means that has to take a little bit of time, that's fine. Anybody disagree?
Any other input on it?
No. Okay. All right. You got a direction, Andy?
I have a direction.
Okay.
Okay, moving on.
There is the property in question. And you can see where the stream would flow down here. I do think it would be feasible right in this area. It's relatively flat compared to the rest of it. I think you could do a detention.
You're not talking about a big facility if you're...
No, no. Now procedurally, Bruce, we're not at our 90-day limit. This is the first
Sounds like we're gonna get there.
review. So is there any need to even put it on the agenda for next week?
No,
Okay.
there is not, now that you've raised it, but I think you've got to raise those two things to them, and I'd be saying to them, I want an indefinite waiver, so we have some time to work on this. Because this isn't going to happen by next month either.
I would agree. Okay.
Unless they're really, there's, yes, sir, okay, we'll do it, okay, that's fine, but I think it's going to take a little while.
Okay, next item is the S18 2017 Andrasic Plan. This is a boundary line revision to adjust boundary lines between three parcels, one of which is the Andrasic residential property on Ashton Court. That's the piece shown here in pink, one of which is Lot 2R of the Lincoln Hills Phase 8 commercial plan. And one of these is the detention pond, which is kind of an apricot color there, which serves both Lincoln Hills Phase 7 and Lincoln Hills Phase 8. There's nothing about this plan whatsoever that does not comply with the ordinance. Why am I going forward? There we go. In essence, what's proposed is to take a triangle of land here, which is currently owned by Andrasic and extends into the detention pond, add that to the detention pond parcel. In exchange, give Mr. Andrasic this piece of ground here, which is our current frontage and access into the pond. There is a gravel road that has been constructed to come into the detention pond area here off of Ronda Court. The two big changes are that this piece of ground right here, which heretofore has been a piece of Lot 2R, is now proposed to be a part of the detention pond. The other issue is, while we're on that, this is the piece that you can see circled in yellow here. And this is a bowl, a junction point of 5 different storm sewer pipes and culverts. It is a wetland, it is floodplain, and it has frontage on Country Club and Ronda Court. It looks like that. From the street, it looks like that. And Mr. Schuster proposes to give that to the township. I understand his thinking that if we're going to own some of those culverts, there's an advantage to having that land to access them. There are right-of-ways across that land for all of the pipes. I can tell you, being on the receiving end of a lot of complaints, we're going to get calls about why isn't the grass cut like it used to be. Maybe that's something we want to do in an industrial park area. Maybe it isn't, I don't know, but that is one thing to deal with. The second issue is that the detention pond parcel, which you can see here, I'm sorry to say it doesn't look like the contours have followed through very well on the screen, but the detention pond actually extends into Lot 2R. I don't know whether that was intentional or whether it was a mistake, but all of the detention pond is not within the piece that would eventually be transferred to the township. That has nothing to do with the subdivision. The subdivision is a legal subdivision as it is, but just understand that at some point in the future, if that piece is conveyed to the township, we don't own all of the pond then. The other issue, which concerns me greatly, is that that green path that I've sketched on there is the way to get to the southern portion of that piece of ground if we ever have to do maintenance. The top of the berm of the detention pond is proposed to be 6 feet from the property line. Now, Bob Robinson is here, Rich Albert is here, we've talked about this. My concern was, I don't know how you get equipment through a 6 foot wide berm. I think both of them agree that you need 10, maybe 12 feet, just because a dump truck or an excavator is going to be 8 or 9 feet wide. With a dump truck, you've got mirrors that overhang on both sides. Our stormwater management ordinance requires a 15-foot wide access easement around all stormwater management BMPs, which is best management practice, that would provide ingress to and egress from a public right-of-way. So I'm not going to be the one to be maintaining it. I'm not going to be the one to be cutting the grass or cleaning out the pond, but one of those guys over there, maybe both of those guys over there will be involved in that. If you guys want to add anything, help yourself. I just think this is the point to get the layout right so that we can properly maintain this property in the future. If we don't get it right now, we've lost our chance.
Rich, Bob, you have any comment?
Yeah, I think Andy's right. Yeah, 6 foot wide and bringing a 10-ton dump truck, it doesn't work. You need at least 10, if not 12 feet. I would recommend 12.
Okay. Rich?
I'd have to agree with, Bob, and we had this discussion, and I even told Andy in an email that 12 foot's a good length to work at, but minimum would be 10 foot. Not only a dump truck, but we also have a tractor with a boom arm that at least means 10, but 12 for safety reasons actually works out better for us.
Can I respond to that?
Absolutely.
State your name for the
My name's
record.
Bob Schuster, RWS Development, 8958 Hill Drive. I don't have a problem with that. The problem I have is this: the ordinance says that if it's 10 feet high, you take half the distance, which is 5 feet. We made it 6 feet. Now, if we would have known prior to that, we could draw a line on there. It's a matter of putting the line on there that could give you your easement for 10 feet. Now, I'd like you to come over to the site and look at it and see what you're talking about, because apparently you haven't gone over there and looked at what I'm talking about. It's very simple to get in that pond from any area. There's one area in the corner that I hear that there's a problem because we didn't fill it, probably about 10 loads of dirt. If you insist, we'll fill it, and I'll have it filled immediately. First dry day we get here, I can have that filled. That's not my concern. We left it open so we would have a place to dump dirt from the site. But if you don't want it that way, we'll fix it. There's also a question about the fiber mesh that goes in the spillway. It said in an email it's not there, it is there. The pond that I'm dedicating, that I want you to take the junction.
Who said in an email it's not there?
It's right here.
Could you read it?
It says, it appears that the pond extends existing pipes for the information given in the spillway. Here, you want to read?
I believe what I said was the note on the plan says it shall be added, and my question was, is it there, or is that something that's going to be done in the future?
What's the difference? It's there now. I mean, let's not make a big issue about it.
I didn't bring it up.
I only put it up because it's on here. I don't want to get into it again. But basically, that is all done. If you want the things filled in, we'll do it probably tomorrow. And I want to meet with you two gentlemen on the site and explain what's going on over there, because this is easy to talk. You need to be there and look at it and see what's going on. And I wouldn't have a problem putting the line in there if I was told, don't go by the ordinance. But the ordinance says that. And there's another place in the ordinance that says it again. So we have a grading ordinance is where I'm quoting from, the 10-foot height. It's only maybe 6 feet high, so I should only give you a 3-foot piece.
My reference is to the stormwater management ordinance.
Well, then let's go to that one, read what it says.
A 15-foot wide access easement around all stormwater management BMPs that will provide ingress to and egress from a public right-of-way.
My question is, do we have that around all the retention ponds at that kind of distance?
I have not cataloged that. I can't tell you that.
That pond can only be accessed from one area, and that's off of Rhonda Court. If you're talking about coming down from the Lincoln Hill side, it's impossible. It's a 2-to-1 slope. You run your trucks down there and overturn it. Now you've got about 300 feet of access off of Rhonda Court. And I would really appreciate it if you guys would come over and look at it. So I had Mr. Harold come over there and look at it. The junction point where all these pipes come into is definitely a wetland. I dare you to go down there and maintain it if you don't own it all. I cut that personally on Saturday. I took a small excavator and went down there. And if you think you're gonna stay on these easements in here, you're badly mistaken. You're not gonna maintain any of that unless you own it all. And if you don't own it all, how are you gonna take care of it? Those are all your pipes in there, every one of them. There's got to be about 7 or 8 of them, not just 5 or 6. It takes all the water from the Legends. It takes all the water from Lincoln Hills. It takes everything, that whole valley over there, comes into there. Now, I had asked for this to be dedicated. I don't see anything. What do I got to do to get this dedicated? I've been trying since last July. I have documentation of that. I spent $75,000 already in engineering and maintenance over there that I think is totally asinine. And that's beyond the point. Right now, I just want to get it done. How do we get this done?
Mr. Schuster, I talked to Mike. He said go through him and he'll set up with Bob and Rich to have an on-site inspection for you guys down here.
When will this get dedicated? I've been trying for 15 months. And I'm not blaming you, Mike. Believe me, I'm not.
So you mean to transfer the property to us?
Right.
Well, there's a boundary line change, right? There's a law.
Right, that has to be dedicated. That has to be approved.
Well, it has to be recorded first to do that, right, Bruce?
Yes. That could be done next Thursday after your meeting.
Well, I'm just thinking we can't accept a parcel that doesn't exist yet, right? It has to be recorded.
Well,
That's the only thing I'm thinking.
Okay,
What
what he's making is after next Thursday it'll exist.
Yeah.
So, so can he look forward to possibly dedication in the month of November?
Well, I think we need to look at these issues. You've heard Andy's concern. He has a number of concerns. So I mean, if you're not worried about any of those concerns, then I think that they should be looked into some more. And maybe we should correspond back to you. Like, what is the staff's position?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to take over the retention pond area that the staff's not comfortable with us maintaining in the future. I think that would not be in our best interest, obviously. So, if the staff and after, the review from the staff, if we're comfortable with whatever improvements maybe need to be.
I have no problem with that. I just do not allow him on my site. Because it's very biased when he's there.
So we're going to have another set of eyes look at this, and
I ask when?
So there's a pond we're owning, we already own, but there's another piece being added to it. So there's, I don't know if I was out of the room, Andy, we have to maintain it, cut it. There's some things for us to take care of, I don't normally like to do that, but that's gonna be up to you.
Wait a minute, you don't have to maintain anything. I have never cut that grass over there, that's being done by those hotels, they continue to cut that. What I cut was what the town should be taking care of down in the ravine and cleaned all that up. That grass has been maintained by the township.
Yeah, I'm talking about where the wetlands are, so.
Oh, mine.
Yeah, well, we'll have to maintain that.
No, you will not.
Oh, we won't?
You don't maintain any other pond in this township, why would you do it?
Oh, I'm just saying, we get complaints from, it's a commercial area with offices, and if they drive by, if it's unsightly, we get complaints and we'd have to maintain it. That's what I was referring to.
Well,
If it's visible and it doesn't look right, we'll get calls about it.
Mr. Harold was there, does it?
If you're okay with it, it's just a decision for you to make. We don't,
cut down to the ground, it looks like it's got a lawnmower.
so we typically have trouble sometimes with all these, but if that's what you want, then we'll.
Well, when can we do this? Because I would like to get this done. Mr. Andrasik wants to get done?
How about if we schedule for Tuesday after our staff meeting, Tuesday in the morning, would that work for you, Mike? And Bob and I just discussed it, and we felt that think that'd be a good time.
Can't do it this week?
I think they're being very reasonable.
Well, the reason I want to do it, they come over and look at it, I'll fill it in, and anything they say will be done before your meeting. I'm not trying to be unreasonable, I'm trying to get the job done. If there's anything physically we need to do, it will be done.
Well, this week's just about over. Tomorrow's Friday, and I'm not available tomorrow unless Bob would want to go. But
How about Monday?
How about Tuesday after staff meeting?
Well, looks like that's all I'm going to get, so that's fine. What time will that be?
Well, we're all together then, so Bob's not here every day. Tuesday would be good if we can. It is before our Wednesday meeting.
You want to give me a call to meet you there?
sure, I have your number, Bob. So
I'd say between around 11, between 11 and 11:30.
All right, we'll keep it open. But when will this get dedicated? I mean, I'm not kidding. I was up in front of you guys here a few months ago trying to get it. This is 15 months now. And if you feel you want me to put an easement on top of that hill on this subdivision, I can have the engineer do that, and then you're fine. Rather than doing these drawings all over again. Would that solve your problem?
I think you guys have a meeting Tuesday, you guys can discuss it. Yeah.
Let them finish figuring it out.
Let's see, asking us, what city dates you have, come back those people after Tuesday.
See you Tuesday.
I look forward to it, Bob.
Thank you.
Okay, Andy next.
Last item is the Dell WSAJT lot consolidation. This is kind of a mishmash of land right now between Entry Road and Main Street, right at the crossroads here with Laurel Avenue. Becker Wholesale Line Supply owns this piece, and this smaller piece where there's a garage. The Veterans Memorial that the Hometown Fire Department maintains is right here. And what Idell would like to do is to combine all of this ground into one piece. He has bought this vacant lot on the corner where traditionally we've had a lot of people parking trucks. It's zoned industrial, it's a floodplain. Nobody can ever build anything on it because of that floodplain. But he would like to be able to use it for a lay-down area or display or something associated with his landscape supply business. So they're proposing to do a swap here to trade some land, but ultimately it's a boundary line revision. I think it would be great to have that industrial corner site underneath his ownership because he does take care of his property and honestly, in the past, it's been a kind of a dumping ground for old vehicles with flat tires and expired inspections. So I think it will be an improvement to have that done. Planning Commission recommends that. The last one we have is a site plan application from an entity called Uncommon Favor, Inc. And this is for the piece of ground which sits at the corner of 30 and Arona Road, right across from the BP station at Arona and 30, and the old Texaco station that's on the other side of 30. There was a framing gallery and a beauty salon in that building. That building was torn down and purchased by the Turnpike Commission. There is the thought that maybe at some point when they redo the interchange, that it may be feasible to bring a slip ramp off of the Turnpike westbound and bring it out to that intersection to eliminate that much traffic that would have to find its way onto 30 through the current ramps. And when they go with tollless, the Easy Pass ticketing, they don't have to have all the traffic coming to a single point for the toll booth. They can have just sensors to read, and there can be multiple ramps. So the Turnpike has that in the back of their mind, but for now they own the property, it's sitting there empty, and I don't know who approached who, but they would like to, or are willing at least to lease it to him for 7 years. Now, what he wants to do with that, this is Rain Remodeling, and they want to put a sales office there. And I'm not going to kid you, it's an office trailer like you would see at a construction site. The Planning Commission is not keen on the look of that at all. They have proposed landscaping and some site amenities, screening in a dumpster, putting some shrubbery, which they've already actually started to do along Route 30. But you can't dress up an office trailer, that's what it is. Unfortunately, the zoning ordinance, I shouldn't say unfortunately, it is what it is. The zoning ordinance does allow metal as a building material. And frankly, from trying to administer the ordinance, we've allowed that with all of the car dealerships because they now all have the brushed finish metal on the front of them. The Subaru did it, the Kia dealership did it, the Dodge Chrysler Jeep dealership did it. That's what car dealerships look like these days. So they are in compliance with the zoning ordinance. Unfortunately, so is a metal-sided office trailer. They would have to have bathroom facilities, and there is a sewer tap available on that site. There would be skirting around the bottom, and they'll have to have handicapped access by the way of a ramp to get somebody who might be in a wheelchair up into the first floor of the building. But they really couldn't find any reason to turn it down. They're not enthusiastic about the look, but Planning Commission recommends approval of this site.
Andy, do you think we could get him to put something on the front there to dress it up somewhat, like a little overhang or something, make it look like a porch or something?
You can certainly ask. He is not here tonight, and frankly, he was not at the Planning Commission meeting. He sent his surveyor. If you would like to table that and maybe ask him to come to the meeting next month, we can see if he'd be willing to do that.
Yeah, I'd like to see a little more of what he's planning to do. I mean, right now, you said the Turnpike owns the property, and what jumps out at me here is possible future use. PennDOT and Turnpike commissions and that, you know, something could never come to that property as far as using it for the Turnpike. You said he has a lease for 7 years, I believe?
I believe that's right.
Yeah, and you're right, he wasn't at that meeting, he wasn't at this meeting. I'd like to see a little more on what he's planning on making this look like myself.
Okay.
He's a remodeling company, he ought to be able to come up with some kind of drawings or pictures.
So we will remand this to the Planning Commission for some additional discussion.
You're okay on time with this one?
Yes, we're okay on time with all of them, except for that Lincoln corner.
Any other questions? Thank you, Andy. Further board comments?
I don't know if I said it earlier, but great job on the 5-year road program. I know at least I've been, some other board members been asking for something really comprehensive like this, and you guys blew it out of the park. Great job.
Thank you. That was, the staff did a really good job. It was one of our priorities. We had to, under the circumstances of the past year, we had to stay a little focused to get it done, and but it was a priority, so.
Really helps to get a good picture, just not, capturing, like you were saying, that year by year. So if we can try to work on a plan, and then we'll see how we can move forward with that plan. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you also, like Richard said, gives us something that when our constituents ask us. The only other thing I do have one question on it is on this Excel spreadsheets. Is it possible to put, or would it be worthwhile to put what streets are A, B, C, D, E, F?
These are all D and Fs.
Okay, these are all D and Fs.
Those are all D and Fs.
Okay.
Our practice is not to been programming C-rated streets to try to maintain them, but we realize we keep an eye on them. We know the mileage of them because a couple years down the road, C becomes D and F. So we plan for it, but what we put in a D and F rated streets.
Okay, so the ones that are way back in getting worked on in 2020 and that are already Ds and Fs.
Right.
Okay.
Any other board comments? Bruce, while you were going, kind of Market Manor, asked a question about taking over at Market Manor Park. Dwayne brought it up about having them take it over as individuals, as a group.
Well, they would have to get organized. I mean, they could form a 501c3 corporation, and until, once they did that, we could at least try to facilitate. We own it now, right? We could work through the process of getting a sale done. You might have to put it out for public bid, and they would have to bid on it. I don't think there'll be any other bidders, but that doesn't preclude somebody else from bidding on it. Getting the 501c3 is not easy. It's a process. But if they did that, that would tell me they're really intent on doing it.
Steve might be here next week, so you can pass him. Okay, one more motion to adjourn.
I have a question before we adjourn. Is it possible to get a list of all by award or C, D, and F roads? Okay, I'm requesting one.
Okay, we motion to adjourn.
Make that motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Zach already made second. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried 6-0. We do have executive session for personnel and civil service.